Nexus, a Google brand name that represents the holy grail of smartphones for the Android enthusiast. With each year, the Nexus brand has served as a showcase for pure, unadulterated Android. The Android experience as Google intended it to be. Since 2010, the identity of the Nexus brand name has evolved. With the HTC Nexus 1 and Samsung's Nexus S and Galaxy Nexus, the Nexus name represented the holy grail of Android smartphones. When LG released the Nexus 4 in 2012 and Nexus 5 in 2013, the Nexus brand became synonymous with high-quality handsets sold at an inexpensive price. After Google and Motorola produced a high-end massive flagship in 2014, Google turned to Chinese manufacturer Huawei to produce a new premium-quality Nexus handset for 2015. As this gave Huawei an opportunity to increase brand awareness in Western markets, Huawei produced what is quite possibly the best Google Nexus handset. How's it going, everybody? This is Matt D, and this is my full review of the Google Nexus 6P by Huawei. The overall design of this phone just screams premium, hence the P in the Nexus 6P name. Huawei's 2015 flagship Android reference device is constructed of metal, giving the phone a pleasing, solid, cold feel in the hand. The flat side rails and chamfered edges make it somewhat easier to grip this large, slippery phablet. Taking a tour around the device, the Nexus 6P features a 5.7-inch AMOLED display manufactured by Samsung at a resolution of 2560 by 1440, packing a pixel density of 518 ppi. While this display is quite similar to that of Samsung's Note 5, other content creators have stated that the 6P's display is not as bright as that of Samsung's highly successful line of phablets. On either side of the display, Huawei's included front-facing stereo speakers that really enhance the media consumption experience. Huawei placed the Nexus 6P's power button and volume rocker on the right-hand side of the phone. The buttons offer a satisfying amount of travel and tactile feedback, while the power button is textured, helping to distinguish it from the volume rocker. At the very top, you'll find the usual 3.5mm headphone jack pushed to one side of the device, while the left-hand side of the Nexus 6P is home to the phone's nano SIM tray. On the back of the Nexus 6P, the first thing you'll notice is the so-called visor that houses the Nexus 6P's 12.3-megapixel rear camera. Further down, Huawei and Google have included a Nexus Imprint fingerprint scanner for biometric security and mobile payment solutions. Below the Nexus brand name painted on the phone in landscape orientation, you'll find Huawei branding above a piece of plastic on the phone to help with cellular reception. While Android Marshmallow introduced Google Now on Tap, the Doze battery saving feature, and user-defined app permissions, Android 7.0 Nougat adds a wealth of new features to Google's mobile operating system on the Nexus 6P. First, let's take a look at the redesigned notification shade. With one swipe down from the top of the screen, Google gives you access to a small set of quick toggles including Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, invert colors, Do Not Disturb, and mobile data. A second swipe down will display redesigned app notifications that will now stretch across the entire width of the screen. Plus, with Android Nougat, the user can finally reply to notifications from certain apps directly from the notification shade. Finally, with a third swipe, the standard Android quick toggles will show up, this time with a second page to house additional toggle switches. Another major addition to Google's latest iteration of Android is a new multi-window feature similar to what can be found on Samsung and LG's latest flagship phones. While this is a great addition to larger phones like the Nexus 6P and 2014's Nexus 6, I don't believe I'll using this feature as much on the smaller Nexus 5X. In addition to the split-screen multitasking feature, a double tap on the recent apps key will take you back to your previously opened app. Through the release of Android 7.0, Google has enhanced the Doze battery saving feature through Doze on the Go, which will allow the Nexus 6P to operate in a low power mode while the phone is asleep in your pocket. In addition to the redesigned notification shade, the multitasking features, and Doze on the Go, Google has expanded upon its collection of emojis in the official keyboard. Beneath the surface, Android 7.0 Nougat offers support for the new Vulkan API for better in-game graphics, as well as Daydream, which will enhance the VR experience on select upcoming Android devices. After doing some additional research and watching videos by other tech YouTubers, I've learned of some hidden features of Android 7.0 Nougat. One hidden feature I want to talk about is a System UI Tuner menu in Android Nougat settings screen. After pulling down the notification shade and holding a finger on the settings cog for several seconds, an option called System UI Tuner will be added to the settings menu. In this menu, Android gives you the opportunity to make small customizations to different elements of the user interface. For example, there's a section in the System UI Tuner that allows the user to dictate what notification icons can and cannot appear in the status bar. One aspect of this menu that I appreciate is the fact that one of these screen UI customizations enables a battery percentage in the status bar. I've said it before and I'll say it again, this really needs to be part of stock Android out of the box. Finally, the System UI Tuner includes a demo mode, but as I've mentioned before, this feature is really only useful when putting the 6P on display in a retail store. Next, in the Sound and Notification section of the Settings menu, there's a Pulse Notification Light toggle that allows the user to enable a hidden notification LED. To reiterate what I said in my Nexus 6P so far video, I think the fingerprint scanner on the 6P is in the perfect spot for when I pull the phone out of my pocket. Although I don't use the Nexus Imprint fingerprint scanner very often, I'll take a phone with front-firing speakers and a rear-mounted fingerprint scanner any day over a phone with speakers placed on the rear just to accommodate a front-facing fingerprint scanner. On the back of the Nexus 6P, there's a 12.3 megapixel sensor with an aperture of f2.0, laser autofocus, and a dual LED flash. However, the rear sensor on the Nexus 6P is not optically stabilized. Switching over to the 6P's front-facing camera, the phone's secondary shooter features an 8 megapixel sensor with an aperture of f2.4, while it can shoot video in up to 1080p resolution. When taking pictures with the 6P, the phone was able to capture a lot of images with highly saturated colors, while I was able to get a nice bokeh effect on images with objects in the distant background. Plus, most of my outdoor shots taken in the daytime came out very well. Low-light photographs, on the other hand, weren't that impressive as they included a lot of noise. The video quality produced by the 6P's rear camera is exceptional, although the camera is not optically stabilized. Here are a couple of brief video samples recorded on the rear and front cameras on the Nexus 6P. In the time I spent testing the Nexus 6P, I ran my usual set of benchmarking apps: Speedtest.net, LTE Discovery, Antutu, Quadrant, and Geekbench, just to name a few. As for speed test and connectivity, I ran my Nexus 6P on T-Mobile's network in the northern suburbs of Atlanta, Georgia. According to LTE Discovery, the phone picked up T-Mobile LTE on band 4 as well as the longer-range 700 MHz spectrum on band 12. After conducting numerous speed tests, the phone clocked download speeds ranging between 12.68 megabits per second and 93.27 megabits per second, while the phone clocked upload speeds ranging between 0.4 megabits per second and 30.67 megabits per second. After running benchmarks on Antutu, the phone was given a score of 69,834. Quadrant gave this phone a score of 19,320. Finally, after running tests on Geekbench, that application gave my Nexus 6P a single-core score of 1,233 and a multi-core score of 4,056. When reviewing the phone's battery performance, I would often keep screen brightness between 50 and 75%. In addition to that, I would take advantage of Wi-Fi when available with cellular data turned off. I kept NFC and Bluetooth turned off as I rarely had a need to use them. Finally, I would typically disable everything except voice calls before bed. During the review period, I was only able to get as much as 3.5 hours of screen on time. That may not be that impressive, but I would attribute that to my own personal usage habits. Keep in mind your mileage may vary. As usual, to test the 6P's gaming performance, I spent time playing Need for Speed Most Wanted, Asphalt 8, and Leo's Fortune on the phone. While the Nexus 6P handled heavy-duty games without hindering performance, the device did get fairly warm after extensive use. Finally, as someone who watches a lot of YouTube content while on the go, I really appreciate the front-facing stereo speakers on the 6P. I'm surprised front-firing speakers haven't become more commonplace over the past several months. Anyway, here's a quick demonstration of the speakers on the 6P. As someone with years of experience working in wireless retail, I unfortunately developed a negative opinion of both Huawei and ZTE after selling many of their cheaper phones designed for the US prepaid market. However, over the past couple of years, I've watched a lot of content creators talk about phones like the Huawei P9, the more recent Honor 8, and the ZTE Axon 7, in addition to the Nexus 6P. After having used the Nexus 6P for several months now, my opinion of Huawei and other emerging Chinese manufacturers has begun to change. As I alluded to earlier, some YouTubers have complained about the fact that Huawei placed the 6P's fingerprint scanner on the phone's rear. but I think it's in the perfect place as the fingerprint sensor sits exactly where my finger rests when I pull the phone out of my pocket. Plus, I prefer having the fingerprint sensor on the back to accommodate the Nexus 6P's front-facing speakers. Unless you manage to get your hands on an HTC M9 Plus, you'd be hard-pressed to find a phone that has a front-mounted fingerprint scanner and front-firing speakers. There were two major points of controversy surrounding the build quality of the Nexus 6P during its time as Google's King of the Hill Android phone. Zach at Jerry Rig Everything pointed out a flaw in the phone's structural integrity, causing the phone to snap in half when sufficient force is applied. Another source of controversy for the 6P has been the glass on the rear visor cracking due to quality control issues when the Gorilla Glass was manufactured by Corning. In terms of durability, my unit has held up quite well. However, one concern I have about my Nexus 6P is that it seems to have a small permanent smudge in one part of the front glass. Overall, I think the 6P is the best built Nexus smartphone. The phone's metal frame gives the 6P an ultra-premium feel, while Huawei's Nexus device is just heavy enough, showing just how solid the phone is. Since the inception of the Nexus product line, phones bearing the Nexus name had become synonymous with subpar camera quality. This time around, I think Google and Huawei selected a top-notch camera from Sony. The Exmor IMX377 is quite possibly the best rear camera ever on a Nexus smartphone. When it comes to performance, my Nexus 6P breezes through apps and chews through benchmarks. While I don't see any of the infamous thermal throttling that Qualcomm's Snapdragon 810 is known for, my unit does get quite warm during extended periods of gameplay. Now in late 2016, Google has brought an end to its Nexus product line, replacing it with a new brand called Pixel. So what will the legacy of the Nexus brand be? While it was Google's showcase for the Android operating system, tech enthusiasts and developers saw it as a software modder's dream. Others saw the Nexus name as a line of superior quality yet affordable Android hardware. Either way, with its premium build, top-shelf silicon, incredible camera hardware, and vibrant display, Huawei's Nexus 6P may well have been the absolute best of what the Nexus name represented. Now, the question that remains is, will the Pixel phones live up to be worthy successors of what was the ultimate representation of what an Android device can be? Folks, as always, if you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up down below and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos in the future. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.